What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. It's been kind of a busy weekend, doing a lot of extra stuff outside of just Thrall stuff. You know, birthday parties, went to a show, and I was looking for something to review as a fourth review for this week of releases, and I was reminded of one in the comments, so I figured why not go over this one, even though my background with this band is almost non-existent, despite this band being around for quite some time. So we're going to go over the latest offering from Cirith Ungol, Dark Parade. This also comes out on the 20th of October on Metal Blade Records. This band formed in 1971 in Ventura, California. They broke up in 1992 and then reformed in 2015. This is their second release since reforming. I missed out on their album Forever Black. I heard a lot of good things about that album from fans of the band. I've never really considered myself a fan of the band just because I really haven't listened to much of their stuff. The only album I own is actually a compilation called Servants of Chaos, which is mostly demos and live tracks, so it's not necessarily maybe the best thing to get a good reading on this band for. So despite this being their sixth album overall in their career, this is the first one that I have ever sat down and listened to the entire thing. And for those that don't know, this is a classic heavy metal band slash epic doom band, and I mean, it kind of fits both of those. This is fiercely old school, riff driven, lots of great soaring leads, lots of doomy atmosphere. You have riffs that are, you know, very akin to bands like Black Sabbath and maybe Pentagram, but also a lot of like Manila Road and stuff like that. Like definitely a lot of classic heavy metal harmonies and leads all over here. And these are all things I love about classic heavy metal. So it was kind of high in time to actually check out this band, especially considering that next year, at the end of next year, they are retiring from touring. So theoretically, this could be their last release before like retiring completely. I mean, they've been around since 1971, so I kind of get it. Now, I did think it was interesting that this band has some ties to a band that I'm actually a fan of in the heavy metal realm, Night Demon. Their bassist is actually the bassist frontman from Night Demon, Jarvis Leatherby, and Armand John Anthony, who does guitars for that band, is the one that mixed and mastered this. And I'd say he did a pretty good job. This is a nice, like, robust sounding album. The guitars are nice and heavy. There's a good low end to it. The drums are nice and punchy. It has a very full sound, and I think it's the doom metal side of them that comes out in this giant tone that's on here. I mean, you gotta have these, you know, more oppressive riffs on here, and they have to sound kind of threatening and ominous, and you can't really do that with a thin tone. Songs like Relentless, Sacrifice, and Looking Glass all rely on just like big chunky riffs to sort of drive the songs. The drums kind of stay in a more groovy pocket overall. You do have some more up-tempo numbers and occasionally like some more up-tempo sections in songs, like the opening track, Velocity SEP, or the bridge on Sailor on the Seas of Fate, which has this awesome D-beat section where you get some really good soaring riffs and great harmonies on there. The guitar harmonies and guitar work on this album, I think, are exceptional across the board, especially the leads. The leads have some just outstanding character and a lot of variety. You get like a lot of classic heavy metal, you get some like really good wah-drenched doom metal leads, especially in the last track, Down Below, which seems like it's channeling Black Sabbath throughout the entire thing. Like you have these plodding drums and this big ominous riff that drives it. And the lead just sounds crispy and evil without using like a ton of dive bombs. It's just nice, sullen, dark melodies throughout. And the song Looking Glass has an amazing blues lead on it. Like it's just very much like driven by feel. It drops out the heavy guitars leading into it and kind of lets this cleaner tone kind of just carry it as this lead goes, and then builds back into the heavy section. But it's driven by these great bluesy licks, and this lead has so much character to it. I absolutely love that moment. They even backed it with some synths to kind of give it a little bit of extra atmosphere, and atmosphere in here is, you know, kind of sparing. Like you get, you know, some ocean samples to kick off Sailor on the Seas of Fate. Looking Glass starts off with Breaking Glass. Little too obvious there, but I mean, it does set it up. And the song Sacrifice starts off with amazing Spanish guitar, again, adding a lot more to the guitar dynamics on this album. But the stuff that I generally really latched onto was the more classic heavy metal approach, and the title track and Distant Shadows have some amazing heavy metal harmonies once again, and gorgeous leads. Distant Shadows in particular might be the catchiest track on there just with the guitar licks. Every guitar section on that song I think is just catchier than hell. There's this cool little galloped riff with the like nice little harmony at the end that is just like an instant earworm for me. Like it kind of takes me back to like listening to Iron Maiden's Killers for the first time, and I always will latch on to stuff that sounds like that. Like that's kind of my wheelhouse with like classic heavy metal. And all these songs are really good about taking the bridge for a walk. Yeah, I know when I say that everyone thinks about Ron Burgundy, and they should. It's a great scene. But it's an accurate term because they kind of just rock out these long bridges, play long lavish leads over them, or just have fun with the melodies and riffs themselves. And for me, that kind of adds to the whole like riff rock vibe of this band. Like at their core, I just feel like this is just riff rock. They find a good riff, they hang on to it, and they build on it and add a lot of cool melodies on top of it to make it stand out more. And for the most part, I think that formula kind of works on here. But this album does have some drawbacks, and you know, from reading up on this band, I kind of get the impression that this is like a love it or hate it sort of band. And generally, that's kind of centered on one thing, at least as far as I've read, and that is the vocals. Vocals are admittedly really hard to get into. Tim Baker's vocals are very much an acquired taste. They aren't necessarily very tuneful. It's more or less like a high-pitched wail, and when it comes down to being in key, it's kind of like dealer's choice with his vocal cords. Like sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. There's a bit of a range fluctuation occasionally. Sacrificey is doing some deeper roars. They all sound very dry, and it sounds like he's really pushing too hard often, and it definitely leads to some mixed results. But even then, I went back and listened to my demo collection again. I know that's probably not the best barometer for this band, but it is what I have. And I did choose to go with a live version of the eponymous track Cirith Ungol from 1985, because I figured that's like kind of right where they were at their peak, essentially. And even then, the vocal approach is very rough, and I can see where a lot of fans would draw the line there, because you have all these great guitar melodies all over the place, but you don't have a vocalist that really kind of matches up to them. Like often he's kind of doing his own thing, and you get this sort of like descending or ascending wail that isn't necessarily matching up to the big guitar riffs or guitar melodies that are going on behind it. And that was a big issue for me to try to look past in this album, and ultimately I really couldn't. And I get that there are definitely people out there that really like his vocals. I'm just not one of them. You know, there's definitely a lot of bands out there where the vocals are kind of a dividing line with fans. Like I know some people don't necessarily get into Snake's vocals from Voivod. I get it. It's an acquired taste. I grew to love them. Perhaps with more listens of this band, I'll grow to like Tim Baker's vocals. But at this point, they were kind of off-putting. And in the moments on here where the music was not as interesting, the vocals really stood out as a glaring thing on here. The opening track, Velocity SEP, I don't know what SEP stands for, but it doesn't seem like it's very important. That song is essentially like two riffs. It's kind of an up-tempo number. Like it's the only song on here where I'd say it is up-tempo throughout the entire thing. But it kind of just hammers on one riff, and granted there's a cool lead section on it. There's a cool lead section on all these songs. But the song really doesn't go anywhere. And like I was saying, because the music wasn't as interesting, I kind of focused on the vocals, and the vocals really just did not do much for this. Now, I thought Relentless was a lot better. It had some cool Middle Eastern melodies on it that kind of spiced it up, and the doomy riffs that carry it were really good. So I didn't focus on the vocals as much, and they were maybe a little bit better on that one. But when I got down to Sailor on the Seas of Fate, that song is, you know, supposed to be the big long epic, but it feels kind of just drawn out. Like you have sections on the drums where it feels like a long buildup. Like kind of feels like war drums at first, and you're kind of waiting for it to get into like, you know, like the main part of the verse or something like that. You have these chanted vocals, and it's this steady plodding drum rhythm, and it kind of just hangs on too long. And that's not the only place in the album where it does that. There are like sections that feel like they should be like a couple of measures just to sort of lead in and build up to get to the main riff, but they kind of just hang there, and I don't know, I feel like they kind of get like stuck there. And then there were just some moments where I just thought the songwriting was just a little odd. Like the title track. I think the title track has, again, excellent riffs, excellent melodies, but how it's arranged is just a little odd. And it has like a particularly strange end. While it leads in really well with some great heavy metal harmonies, builds into a good doom riff, it has this section where it kind of flips back to this heavy metal section right at the end. You think you're going to kind of ride that section out because it has all the epic harmonies. Like, it's a good place to end the song, maybe on a fade out. But then it just kind of drops out, and you wait a couple of seconds, and you get this blues rock section that just feels kind of tacked on. Like, it was just a little jam in the studio, and they didn't want to part with it because they liked it for whatever reason. It's not terrible, but it just doesn't fit with the song. So overall, yeah, this was kind of a mixed bag for me. And again, I don't want to say that I am basing, you know, my entire review of the band itself on this album. I may have just jumped on the wrong point. Like, you know, they're kind of getting ready to hang it up here. And I've honestly never jammed in their older stuff, so I've never really listened to them while they're in their prime. So, I mean, honestly, for me, this album was kind of a mixed bag. Like, yeah, I got, you know, some really solid riffs, some great lead work. Songwriting, for the most part, was really solid. But I definitely found some stuff that I really wasn't a fan of. So overall, I'm going to give this 2.5 stars. Again, I know this band gets a lot of respect in the underground, and don't think of this as me shitting on them. This is just sort of a first real reaction to a full album of theirs. And again, I may have jumped on the wrong point, but as for this album, this band kind of sounds a bit tired, and, well, man, the vocals just really don't do much for me. And they are so drenched in effects to make them sound much bigger than I think they actually are. But I will say, this band's got riffs. This band's got excellent lead work. Like, the lead work on this album, I think, is absolutely fantastic. There's a great amount of variety to it. And regardless of how I felt about the vocals, every song on here had some solid riffs. Not necessarily always, like, stitched together the best, but for the most part, there's always something that drew me in with every song. There wasn't any song in here that just completely made me want to turn it off. These guys are old pros at working the contrast between, like, you know, doomy oppressiveness and, like, soaring, epic, triumphant leads and all that. They know how to mix that together pretty damn well. And eventually, I'm going to get around to checking out some of their older stuff. But for me, I really just wasn't feeling most of this, but again, it still had some bright spots, so we're kind of just going to go with the halfway mark on here. But I will say, if you are a longtime fan of this band, definitely go get this, definitely support them. This could be their last hurrah, and, you know, if they are retiring at the end of next year, go see them live, go support them, go tell them thanks for all the awesome tunes over the years. These guys are old school road dogs, and they deserve, like, a solid send-off, so give them some love. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below at thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, but thrallsmetal.com is where our store is. We have t-shirts, we have hats, we have discounted old t-shirts. If you're looking for some Thrall stuff, that is exactly where to find it. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that stuff. It is still an absolute blast doing this. I've been kind of slacking on the comments here lately just because I haven't had time this weekend. Next weekend's probably going to be busier in hell too. But I will definitely get down to talking to you guys once again, and plenty of stuff coming on the channel. Again, I think we have a date for Judas Priest, so looking forward to getting that one done, because that is going to be a daunting task, recording and editing all that, but it's going to be fun talking about that absolutely amazing band. So once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.